welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm Jessica. I am your host, and I am back with Deanna Raybourn to talk about, oh my goodness, the second book in the Killers of a Certain Age series. And, the first one is one of my favorites. I make everybody who has not read it. Read it. No, for sure. Like I have chased people down the library and friends with your book and been like, read this book. So I was really excited when I saw that the second one was available and I needed to talk to you about it again. So welcome back to
Thank you.
You're welcome. And let's talk about Kills Well with Others.
Let's do it.
So, I know last time we spoke, we were pretty certain that this was not the end of Billie and her friend's story, that there was much more to tell. This one was great. It had a lot of twists. It had a lot of characters that I wanted to see more of from the first book, a lot of character development, and just super, super fun times with guns and knives and women hitting people up. Was it a natural progression to reach this story from the last one? Because I was really happy to see where the root of this one came from, because it felt, I don't want to give away what their, where this all began, but it brought me back to why I loved the first one so much and then expanded on it. So this particular storyline that you are exploring in Kills Well with Others with Billie and Helen and Natalie and Mary Alice. And am I missing somebody?
That's our foursome.
That's the foursome, right? I'm like, wait a second. Like, no,
You remembered them better than I do. Sometimes I'm starting to recite their names and I'm like,
yeah, I'm
like,
no,
I forget?
Akiko is Mary Alice's wife and Taverner is not one of them, but he is. But yeah, was this kind of a natural progression? Did you know that this is where their second story would begin?
No, it was completely accidental. Because when I wrote the first book, as far as everybody knew, it was a standalone. And, of course, they wanted me, the publisher wanted me to leave a little bit of room in case the book did well, and the book did very well. And she was a very popular book. And almost immediately they said, okay, we're going to need a Killers 2. And so I had to, I gave them kind of a happily for now ending at the end of the first book where, there was always, of course, going to be potential to bring them back, but they were retired. They had officially stopped doing, what they do. They weren't killing people anymore for a job. So
no more murder for now.
No more murders for now. And I had to have a reason to have them kind of gather back together. And it made sense to have that impetus be from a case that we had made reference to in the first book. And so it just kind of fell into place because I knew what type of person I wanted to be their adversary in this book. And then I realized as soon as I started mapping it out, I went, oh my God, I set it up so well in the first book. And it was a complete accident. It was a complete accident.
It was a beautiful accident.
It really was. It was one of those fantastic serendipitous things that happen sometimes when you're writing a series and you can just kind of go back and just harvest through, the seeds that you planted in the first book. Now they've got fruit and you're like, I did not expect that. That's perfect. So I was not going to let that gift horse in the mouth. So I just grabbed that and ran with it. And it just kept working out. Every angle I went around with it, I was like, okay, that works. And it was ticking all these boxes. And so I was able just to develop it into the full book and had a lot of fun with it.
It was a lot of fun to read.
Good. That's the goal.
Oh my goodness. I do love me some complicated women with weapons. Yeah, I think like one of the things I really love about it is just how rich all of their relationships are and how every single one of your assassins are so distinct and so different in just sort of how they go about things. But you also have such a knack for this dialogue that is so funny and feels
Thank you.
so like how people I know talk. I mean, it's I often wonder as we all age a little bit, just how much our vernacular is going to sound like old-timey talk when, our kids are older. Like, are people going to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer and be like, that old-timey talk? Like, what do you, is it going to sound, but it really just like, it feels so funny. And it's just this testament to the fact that like women as they get older, like they can still be funny, they can still be witty,
Mm.
like you don't suddenly grow into a grandma and that's it. And it's the same thing with the killers and just sort of how they come about things. I guess another question I have for you is how much, being that the adversary to this book, which again, I don't want to say anything because I really want
This is
everyone,
a spoiler-free zone, Jessica.
spoiler-free zone. Well, the reason, honestly, I mean, I could, but I really just want people who read this book coming off the second one to start to do what I did, which is basically start reading it. And then you realize what is going to happen and you go, oh, and you get just this really excited moment where you
Yeah.
feel like something that was just kind of set up is more than set up because it is. But how much do you plot their adventures to begin with? Because everything was just so fast paced.
Yeah.
I felt like I was stumbling through it all with them.
Well, and that's the thing is because in the first book and in the second one, they're kind of flying blind. They're thrust into a situation that asks them to rely on their wits, their experience, and they have nothing to go on except instinct and some very limited intelligence of, what's going on behind the scenes. They don't have access to all of the information that they would have if they were out on one of their assassin missions. They're greatly limited. And so we see them having to do things that they don't ordinarily have to do, but they've got the skills to do it. There are ways that they have to gather intel on people, ways they have to elude people, ways that they have to kind of lure people into traps. And we see them doing all of this stuff on the fly, and they're having to make these decisions really quickly, and they're having to kind of just go with what their gut is saying, hey, this is going to be the best course of action. And they don't always agree on what that course of action is. And they're not always right about what that course of action is, because we do see their limitations too, very much, I think, in this book. And, because of the fact that they're so limited with information and they can't really get a grasp of the big picture, they're reacting a lot instead of driving the action because someone else is in play here, and that's the person who actually has a fully developed scheme, whereas our assassins are just like, oh crap. And they're constantly playing catch up. And so we see them trying to figure out, what is the master play here? What is, what is this person's ultimate goal? And how are we going to make sure that we're in at the end game?
Does that give you trouble as a writer?
That's the fun part as a writer. When you're doing anything that is mystery or thriller based, there's always this huge debate, and people always ask writers, do you start with character? Do you start with plot? And the vast majority of the time, writers will say that they start with character. A lot of the time when you're doing mystery or thriller, you might have to start with plot, or at least you have to pay very, very careful attention to plot. And it's simply because of the fact that if your character is going to find out a piece of information that we'll call C, they may have to do A and B to get there. And there is a certain logical progression that will happen in the course of a thriller, especially with thriller and mystery, both. You're having to sit back and judge how much information do I need to give the reader and when do I need to give it? How do I maintain a sense of suspense? How do I create and maintain tension so that the reader's going to want to keep turning pages? Because ultimately that's the goal, is to keep the reader kind of perched on the edge of the seat and, turning pages late into the night.
When talking about just the interpersonal relationships, not just between the four, but between the people in their lives, I do like how everybody kind of goes about it very differently. Billie is very much set in her ways. She knows what she wants. She knows what she doesn't want.
Uh-huh.
She is very happy to have Taverner back in her life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the way that he would like to be in her life, but it adds to just, it makes for just like a really interesting balance between them. And then, you've got Mary Alice, who's married to her wife, very happily married, and Helen, who's fine with a friend, or rather
Yeah.
with benefits and maybe a friend, but really more benefits. I just, there's just a lot of just different ways in how they look at their attachments. And I mean, we see this a lot here when you have a background and a job like these women have. Having attachments is a liability. Did you find that that part of their personality was kind of coming out more as you were writing them here?
Well, in the first book, we got a little bit of a hint as to how they were recruited, what their backstories were. There's not a ton of detail on any of them, but there is enough to know that you would have to be psychologically messed up to do this job. And the fact that they were recruited when they were 20 to do this job, that's a vulnerable age. We know that Billie grew up poor. She was abandoned by her mom. We know that one of them had an older brother who was killed in the Vietnam War. That kind of devastated the family. Every one of them has some sort of trauma. Natalie has a family who experienced the Holocaust. There's generational trauma in all of their lives that has left them messed up. And it is, if a reader goes back and looks at the first book, if you zoom out, you say, oh, wait a minute, this is really kind of shady to come in and try to collect these damaged 20-year-olds and make killing machines out of them. But that's what they do. And, these young women, very young women, discover that they're good at this, but this is the only thing they're good at. And it does not benefit anybody in the museum, and it does not benefit them to deal with their trauma. So I don't expect that any of these women have gone through extensive therapy and dealt with their stuff. They're not great partners because they're not great people. They haven't, we see elements of them that we like and we root for. That doesn't mean you'd want to be besties with them. It doesn't mean you'd want to be in a romantic relationship with them. We know that Natalie is a serial monogamist. She's had multiple divorces. We know Helen had a marriage, but it had flaws. Mary Alice has finally gotten married. She's 55 when she gets married. She's finally in a place where she has, I feel like Mary Alice is the one of my little kittens who has dealt with her issues probably more than the others.
She seems to be the one who's a bit more on the ball.
But you notice how late in her life she got there.
True.
She is in a wonderful, loving, supportive marriage. The best relationship of any of them is Mary Alice and Akiko. But Mary Alice didn't get there till she was about 55, when she's coming to the end of this career. And even when she does, we know from book one, she never told Akiko what she did for a living. And so that's a reckoning she has to face. So I think, and then Billie is just a mess. God love her. She and Taverner have had their issues, and Taverner wanted his white picket fence and his 2.5 kids and his Labrador Retriever. And Billie was like, not from this girl. I'm not playing happy families with you. And so their relationship, they did part company for quite a while because Taverner wanted that domesticity. And Billie was like, nope, feels like a cage, not going there. And so, we still see at the age, Billie's probably 62 now in this book, she is still struggling with the idea of allowing herself to be vulnerable, to depend on people, to not have to be the person who is always holding it together.
I was also really happy to see more Minka in this book.
Yeah.
Minka a lot.
Yeah, I love Minka. I love this intergenerational friendship that Billie and Minka have because I think Minka's like about 22 or 24 now. And, Billie's technically old enough to be her grandmother, but they look out for each other in a way that I think is really sweet.
And we, again, I don't want to talk too much about it, but there are definitely more characters that kind of come into the overall. I don't know. Are they like a found family, a found dysfunctional family? What would you,
Absolutely.
yeah?
Absolutely. My foursome is absolutely a sisterhood. These are the people who, they've known each other for 40 years. They push each other's buttons in a way that usually only blood family can do. But they are very much a sisterhood, and they are literally ride or dies for each other. They will do anything for each other, including just take the Mickey constantly because it's like, how can I take you seriously when I've known you since you were 20 years old and kind of a moron? Now that we're 60, you're still a 20-year-old moron to me. So that's their vibe that they're operating from, which is a lot of fun. And there is a like you see that especially like again, no spoilers, but there is a significant chicken in this book that is definitely fodder for this whole dynamic of, taking someone seriously versus not taking them seriously.
I love it, and I love just how much happens in it. I know we talked a little bit about this last time, but I mean, now that we're at Killers 2, do you have ideas for Killers 3? Am I asking too much?
I have ideas for Killers 3. Absolutely. I'd be kind of not fulfilling my authorly obligations if I didn't at least have some ideas noodling around. It's not something that I'm under contract for. It's not something that is official. Again, I'm sure they're going to want to see how Killers 2 does. And if this one is successful as well, then I'm sure they'd be on board for a Killers 3, which would be great fun. And if not, we will do something else.
Is it difficult to switch between like this and Veronica Speedwell? I feel like I asked you the exact same question last time we talked, but now that this book is 2 and you've been writing Veronica for so long, is it a difficult split for you?
Yes and no. The universes are so different. The narrative voices are so different that once you make the shift, you're kind of just in that world and you're not really thinking about the other one. The difficulty for me was having to write Veronica 10 and then change gears and do this book and then change gears back to start or having to write Veronica 9, write this book and then change gears for Veronica 10. And so I had difficulty getting started on Veronica 10 just because I was like, no, wait a minute. I'm in Europe. I'm doing this thing. And then I just had to completely turn it all around. So just that initial changing of lanes, I find a little bit tricky sometimes.
Do you have any tricks like listening to music or completely just changing where you sit and the window you look out of?
No, I always write in the same place, but I have murder boards tacked up on the wall and I'll change those out. I'll change to a different writing playlist. It will also like what I watch and what I read for fun will change too. And I will try to make sure that it's, a lot less in the way of period stuff if I'm working on a killer's book and it's more, kind of a little more modern, a little more capery, a little more, a little more thriller, just to kind of keep me in the correct headspace. Whereas, when I was done with Kills Well with Others and, trying to finish up this current deadline that I've just had for Veronica 10, I like did a Bridgerton binge, which because I had never seen Bridgerton, and I was like, feels like the time. So I binge watched Bridgerton,
Did you like
and
it? I
I
have
was
to
so
know.
horny. It was so horny.
Wasn't it though?
It was. I did. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I watched that, and then I watched Queen Charlotte, and I thought, I as soon as you like embrace the whole, this is not trying to be history. This is trying to be a fun, frothy alternative history. As soon as you can get on board with that, yeah, it's great fun. It's well done. It's beautiful. You can tell they poured a ton of money into it. And yeah, I thought it was it is supposed to be a beautiful confection of escapism, and that's exactly what it is. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Anything else that you can recommend as a watch around or a read around after people sink their teeth into this one?
Oh, I just finished a book that I really enjoyed by Maz Evans called Over My Dead Body. And it's about a British doctor who is like one of the most unlikable characters you'll ever meet in your life. And she's basically trying to solve her own murder because, and the police think it was that she took her own life. And she's like, no, I would never. I'm far too egotistical. I would never take my own life. And so she's running around as a ghost trying to solve her own murder. And I don't read a ton of things that kind of fall in the supernatural vein. But this one was just really, really well done. And so I'm reading that, and I'm actually just getting ready to start. I love Richard Cole's. I'm petting my book right now in case I don't know if this I don't know if anybody's going to see a
No,
video
no,
on
no,
this.
but I can
Okay.
we like to talk to each other because we get better conversation when we talk to each other.
We do.
You,
Anyway, so
Nana
I'm
is
petting.
petting that book.
I am petting my Richard Cole's Murder at the Monastery. I am so excited that they are making a series of that because I think it's gonna translate so well. And I think is it BritBox or Acorn? One of the two is making it as a series, and they just started shooting really recently. But I'm also trying to wrap my head around the fact that these books are set in the 1980s and they're technically historical. I'm going to burn something down.
I
Um,
know.
I am not okay with that. I was in high school in the 1980s.
Oh
Stop
my God, people keep telling us things like, oh, like if Back to the Future took place now, it would take place. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it, okay? I don't want to hear
it.
what, like that they'd be dancing to Whoop There It Is in the underneath
No,
dance,
no, I'm
whatever
not
it would
okay.
be. I'm
I'm
not
not
okay with that
okay.
either.
I'm not
Yeah.
okay. No, and I think that gets back to what you were talking about with, when you age and what your cultural references are going to be and becoming a grandmother. Because I just became a grandmother about 4 months ago, and I call him dude because
Congratulations
thank
to
you.
dude and to you.
I'm an 80s teen still in my head, like I drop a lot of likes and totallys in my conversation. I am an 80s teen in the body of a woman who's about to turn 57. And so I call him dude. Yo, little man, what's your problem? And just we speak differently, and we're gonna be the generation that's in the nursing home listening to Tupac, and I
I
I love that
know.
for us, honestly. But but there is still a part of me that when you say the phrase 1970, yes, that was 30 years ago. Because apparently I don't math very well, but it's stuck in my head that 1970 was 30 years ago. And then I sit there and go, and that's just mean. It's just mean.
So we talked a little bit about the your one of your favorite books becoming a series. I know I asked you this last time. Any chance of us seeing the killers on some screen?
And I'm going to give you the answer I gave you last time, which is if there were, I couldn't tell you.
Darn it. Well, stay
So,
tuned. Maybe next time we'll be
stay
talking about
tuned.
how great it
Stay
is.
tuned. Yeah.
Oh,
No, I would dearly love that. I think it would be great fun if it were a film or a series. I think any opportunity we have to see 60-year-old women kicking ass, I think we need more of that.
I mean, what was that? There were at least two of those movies, and I can't remember if we talked about it last time. Those red, retired, extremely dangerous movies.
Yeah,
But
but that one's been a
it
while.
was so good, right?
It was wonderful.
So good. And I know, I mean, we had some women in that, and obviously Bruce Willis, because for
Mhm.
a while it was basically like, yo, there are guns going off, Bruce Willis. You in?
You're right. No, it was
Yeah.
just Helen Mirren in that. as far as when you're looking at women of a certain age, it was just Helen Mirren. And she was, when those films were made, she was not much older than my assassins are. But it's been a minute since those were done. And there are more projects coming out that are featuring women in their early 60s who are doing amazing things, which is so much fun. It's just fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, just saying, if anybody's listening to this and wants to fight for an IP that you absolutely should be developing into something. This is it. Talk to Deanna because you are going to want to talk to her all day. I would like to talk to you all day. So, when is the next Veronica book coming out then?
The next Veronica book, which is Veronica 10, will be out early in 2026.
All right. Well, maybe we will chat about that. For now, check out Kills Well with Others. If you are living under a rock that I have not stalked you and hit you with killers of a certain age, you better go read it, or I'm going to find you and I'm going to make you read it. A lot of people listen to this podcast, so that's not an actual threat. I'm just saying. I mean, you should read it, no matter where you live in the world.
There is no one scarier than a librarian on a mission.
Totally. 100%. 100%. All right. This was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast, coming to you with our amazing return guest,
Deanna Raybourn.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.